Well, it might be spring somewhere, but it is not spring here at Red Poppy Ranch, at least at the moment, but I'm hoping it's coming soon. Because I really want to get outside and work on something other than the shop, but having a long hard winter like we've had is probably the best chance the shop's ever going to get at getting finished, so I'm running the water lines for the bathroom out here in the shop, and I'm trying to run the water lines in a way where I can come back and insulate the water lines and hopefully never have issues with potential freeze. I have found that spray foam around the pipes eliminating any air is really the only chance I have at these pipes not freezing. But once I get the attic insulated in the shop will naturally stay warmer in the wintertime, which should help keep the pipes from freezing. I'm going to tell you that as I installed both the ABS sewer and the water lines for this bathroom, it went very, very fast. I think from start to finish I might have had less than 5 hours in the entire job, because unlike some of the other trades, I've done a lot more plumbing than anything else. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it felt good to get back on that bike and do what I know how to do when it comes to plumbing. When I was learning how to be a plumber, I went through the apprenticeship program, and a journeyman plumber taught me the things that would later help me become a journeyman. But everything else that I've had to learn along the way to build our house and to build this shop, I learned by doing. And therefore made some mistakes along the way, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. As opposed to, again, plumbing. I worked professionally as a plumber from my early 20s until I was about 34 years old. And if I have my way, I will never make a living that way again. But being a plumber is one of these things that I clearly identify with, and I will likely pretend to be till the day I die. One of the things that having a skilled trade, especially as a young man, did for me is it gave me a little bit of confidence in ways that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. It feels good to be able to work with your hands, and it also feels really good to provide for your wife and your kids with the skill that you've learned. I do not believe there's a robot out there that could do my job as a plumber, or that of an electrician, or that of a carpenter, or that of anything where you have the skills to work with your hands. Let me tell you something else. When I shake hands with people, I can tell who has the skilled trade and who doesn't. Most mornings this time of year, Ruby and I go for a ride and just kind of inspect the creek and the road. Last night it rained quite a bit. It's supposed to rain a little bit more today. And I can tell the creek's moving more than it was yesterday. So we're going to run down there and just give her a quick look over and see how fast she's moving today. Right, Ruby? So the creek is definitely moving. It's definitely running faster than it has in a long, long time, but it's not quite as bad as I've seen it. I think it actually has quite a bit of room to get worse. And the truth is, we don't have the concern up here about flooding the way that they do in town. I mean, obviously we're on the side of a mountain. It's kind of hard to flood a place on the side of a mountain, but I'm gonna fly the drone and inspect this because there's a couple of spots that it does look like it's got some debris blocking things and the water's running in places it really shouldn't be. So So, on a cold, miserable, wet, rainy day like today, it's a good day to stay inside the shop and just kind of finish up some of the last little things that I have to do. And really all that I have left at this point is whatever blocking and backing I want to put in for the board and batten siding. This is my last chance to do it because once I naturally cover the walls, I don't want to be messing around with backing for the siding again. I started on this wall yesterday just to kind of see how fast it would go. And it went surprisingly fast and it worked very well. So I'm just going to spend the rest of the day finishing the wall and then taking it one section at a time and just getting this done. Because this is kind of the last thing that I'm dancing around, avoiding doing because it's just not fun work, but it has to be done. So the plan today is to spend as much of the day as I have to get the entire shop. So I ended up putting blocking about on the 4-foot mark, which is right where the insulation splits. And I'm just putting those little, basically 2x4s in there. And that allows me from this side to put some extra screws in just to suck the wood back tight where it's supposed to be so I don't have issues with the bugs. So I don't have issues with the siding in general. I mean, it needs to be sucked back against the shop as tight as I can get it. So the blocking is something that I very easily could have taken care of when I framed it. That's when it should have been done. All the blocking that I would put in for the siding should have been done before the insulation was put in. But of course, I never do things in the order that they're supposed to be done. So that's what I'm going to do the rest of the day. As the crazy world we all live in seems to be spinning out of control at this exact moment, it's hard to know what is true. Nobody is believable anymore. But I still hope and pray that the course can be corrected. Because if it turns out that the last days that I get to spend on this old world end up being spent messing with insulation and backing for siding, that might irritate me just a little bit. But either way, this job has to get done before I can hang the drywall. But ask yourself this, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, say 8 years, would you do anything different then to change where you are now? I would. Knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time 8 years ago and do the things that I now see to be much more important than how I felt back then, I would probably put more energy into our food, like gardens, greenhouses, orchards, livestock, things like that. But because I didn't do this 8 years ago, my only option now is to take action. So in the coming weeks, as the snow goes away, you're going to see projects around developing new pastures and new ways to feed our livestock naturally, and you're going to see us try and get one step closer to living as independent as we can. If you bumped into me on the mean streets of Queen Creek 8.5 years ago, and if you said to me that 8.5 years later, you would be living completely off-grid in the mountains of Idaho, living the dream that you always wanted but didn't know, I would probably laugh at you, genuinely, because that's not where my focus was at that time. All that I was focused on at that moment, 8.5 years ago, was that I knew it was time to move my family out of Queen Creek, Arizona. I wasn't even sure about southeastern Idaho yet, but that's where the house was that we had just rented, and that's where Cedar had just registered our kids for school. So we loaded everything we owned into a couple of trucks, and we drove 800 miles to start over. I'm still installing the backing for the siding. My goal is to make sure that at least every 4 feet, the board and batten siding can be vertically secured. So by adding backing at the 4-foot mark across the entire back of the shop, that will give the siding on the back of the shop the support that it needs as well. I can see it in my mind's eye, and I'm excited about how the shop is going to turn out. Cedar and I have decided that the best way to move forward with the contents of the shop is to remove it and then go through everything. And if we haven't touched it in the last 12 months, we really ought to consider getting rid of it. And by we, I mean me. I'm even taking the time to get up in the rafters and put some backing across the gable ends, both on the front and the back of the shop. Because again, once I get the drywall hung on the ceiling and insulation blown in, I don't want to be crawling around up there unless I absolutely have to. There's some lateral bracing that is supposed to have been installed in the trusses when I originally framed up the shop, and as usual in the back of my head I knew I would get to it at some point in time, and it is now that time. So before drywall gets hung, I need to climb up in these trusses again and put some bracing up to keep the drywall from cracking in the future. When I originally installed most of these 1x12s on the shop, they were still green, so they dried while they were hanging here, and some of them have cupped and twisted and turned a little bit. And if the backing was originally in place when the siding was still green, I could have screwed it off and I wouldn't be dealing with it now. But now that the backing is there across the gable ends, I secured all of the board and batten siding mid-span, which tightened everything up much better than it originally was. I've been waiting for enough snow to melt across the back of the shop where I can get the kids' four-wheelers out of the way and get the siding resecured since I relocated those windows. All of the leftover 1x12s that couldn't be reused on the back of the shop are now going to be turned into firewood. But there's quite a few nails in this wood, and rather than pulling every nail out with a hammer, I use my angle grinder, cut the sharp end off, and the kids will help me cut and stack this, and it'll get used for firewood at some point. Between the mud, snow, and water, the change from winter to summer can be painful at times, but if you can't tell, I am eagerly awaiting those warm summer days. But what's truthfully happening right now is it's still staying cold, and that's good, because where all this water goes after the snow melts is down the hill. And down the hill is a lake that gets used to irrigate all the farmers from southeastern Idaho all the way down into Utah. But there's a real concern around that lake right now, that the earthen dam that was built, I think back in the 40s, there's a real concern that that dam may not hold. Cedar and I have both noticed over the last couple of days, as we've had to go in and out of town, that there's a lot of work going on right now around that dam. So I hope and I pray that that dam does not fail, because if something like that happens, I can only imagine how devastating that would be. But in spite of the snow, I still have stuff I have to get done. My goal for today is to get all of the siding at least put back up. I'm not going to mess with the batten strips because, as you heard in a previous video, I'm going to probably change all the batten strips on the shop at some point in time. Because I put that backing in, I'm able to really pull the siding in tight, and I can see that the box elder bugs and the other things that like to make a home behind the siding, they're not going to be able to do it. So once I put the wider batten strips on, and I don't know when I'm going to get to that, but before I stain the shop, I want to put 3-inch wide batten strips instead of 1.5-inch wide batten strips. The house has 3-inch wide batten strips with 12-inch wide boards. The shop has 1.5-inch wide batten strips with 12-inch wide boards, and it bothers me. I did that a couple of years ago when I was just trying to get the siding finished with the wood that I had, and I cut those batten strips down as narrow as I could get them so I could get as many as I possibly could out of a strip of wood. But I don't like it because it doesn't look as good as the house does. So before I stain it, I'm gonna make some changes to the batten strips, but in the meantime, I at least want to get all the siding back up. I don't know if I quite have enough siding to do it, but this has to be done as well before I can stain it. I'm probably gonna have to run and pick up some more siding come Monday or Tuesday, but my trailer is still under like 2 feet of snow, so I'm trying to make this siding go as far as it can. But if I have enough, that's where I'm gonna use it. So this little guy, and that guy, and that guy were all born about a week apart. The other day, the little one here can still squeeze through the door in the chicken coop and manage to get in there and eat enough crumbles to get a little bit of bloat. And so the more Cedar and I have talked about it, and the more we've kind of discussed just what's best for our place, it all involves going up that way further with the goats and the chickens. All of the decisions we made around this place, as far as building this little chicken coop and building the little goat barn, all came down to the fact that this was the land that we had to work with at that time. Now that we have the new property up here, the very first thing I want to do is I want to move the goats further away from the shop. I want them to have more room in the wintertime to wander around, and I want to be able to feed them differently. I don't like the setup we have right now. Cedar can't feed them. The gates are all frozen closed. The second that the ground is dry enough, we're going to run the fence up onto the new property. And talk about maybe building a hay barn or something like that over there. But in order for that to happen, it has to stop snowing. And it's not stopping fast enough. Again, I wanted to just thank you guys for taking time to watch our videos, because without you, I don't get to do what I do every day. So, thank you. And on our next video, I hope to have a positive report on the inspections that are about to get done. Well, the plan was to work on this all day and get the trim across the top and get some of the carpentry done on it. But it just doesn't feel like a day that I want to spend outside. It's a little bit cold. I feel like I should be inside drinking hot chocolate, watching Home Alone, wrapping Christmas presents. That's what it feels like. It feels like Christmas. It doesn't feel like we're 2 weeks away from May. That's for sure. So I'm done for now on this. Next week I'll get back on it and get it finished up. But let me tell you what we're about to do on the shop. We're going to take everything out of the shop. We're going to take literally every last box, every tool, everything out of the shop. It's going to either come out here or on the front of the where the porch is. And if we haven't touched it in the last year, we're probably going to get rid of it. And what we do decide to keep, I'm going to organize into containers where I know stuff is. It's kind of pointless to hoard things like I try to do, thinking I'm going to use them later, when I really don't even know what I have at the end of the day. So that's going to happen first part of next week. And while it's all cleaned out, we're going to get the inspections done. And then I'm going to start hanging drywall in the places that it's going to get drywall. So, and I hope that the next time you see me, the sun's out and it's a little bit warmer maybe. I'm getting tired of this.